All right. Well, hello. Welcome, Jenny and Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining this kind of collaboration series where I just like to talk with different professionals who support neurodivergent children, teens, adults. So I'm so excited to have you both on today to kind of just talk about the benefits of physical therapy and how we can use physical therapy to support really everyone, but specifically for this call, like neurodivergent loved ones. But yeah, I would love if you all could kind of give a little introduction about yourself, your experience, and who you support.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I am a PT assistant. Currently, I work with Strive Healthcare Services and I work as a marketing liaison. Um, I have worked in pediatrics for the last 10 years. I have 20 years of experience in the field of physical therapy, and I have worked with a lot of neurodivergent children, along with a lot of children suffering from neurological conditions that would also cause them to have a lot of neurodivergence.
Awesome, wonderful.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Jenny Johnson. I'm a physical therapist, and I've been practicing for over 30 years in pediatrics. Have really witnessed kind of the evolution of this neurodivergent population over my career, and have enjoyed really working with this population and the families. So I'm really excited to be here, Amber. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was kind of thinking as you all were introducing yourself, I would love to hear kind of maybe what inspired you to join into the field of physical therapy and kind of hear that background as well. Again, for anyone watching who maybe is interested in potentially pursuing that career, just kind of what were the things that drove you towards the field of physical therapy?
For me, when I was in middle school, my best friend's mom got in a car accident in which she became a paraplegic. So, with that being said, I watched her go through the recovery phase, which required going through intensive rehabilitation. And with that, when I was deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up, that memory of how she went from being completely dependent on everybody to being able to achieve full independence to the point where she lived alone, she drove herself everywhere, she was able to live a full life. That's what inspired me to look into physical therapy as a career. And I worked in neurological rehabilitation for the first 10 years of my career. After that, I moved to Texas, and that's when I transitioned into pediatrics. Because of my background in neurological rehabilitation, it encouraged me to work predominantly with children with neurological conditions, which introduced me to the neurodivergent population.
Wow, that is really cool. I love just hearing the background. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
that's
how about
great.
you, Jenny?
For me, I grew up as a gymnast and was injured repeatedly, went through a lot of physical therapy, and I initially started college of the pre-medical, wanted to be a doctor. And then the more I thought about it, I realized doctors really didn't spend that much time with their patients. And I really wanted to have a more personal interaction with people. And so I chose the PT path and have never looked back. Kind of stumbled into the pediatric world right out of PT school. I wasn't particularly planning on the pediatrics, but my first job was at Denver Children's. I just landed it, and man, after that, I was hooked, and I just have stuck with it through most of my career.
That is so awesome. I just love to hear the background behind that too. So that's, and just again, two very different experiences and different kind of just reasons that drew you to the field. So that's really cool. So speaking about physical therapy and neurodivergent children, teens, and adults, again, we've kind of talked about this before, but in my background in behavior analysis, I have really collaborated a lot with occupational therapists, play therapists, rec therapists, speech therapists, music therapy, but the one that I really have never had the opportunity to do, and then therefore not really thought about even reaching out, is physical therapy. And so kind of if wanted to see if you guys could dive into how physical therapy, how you use that to support neurodivergent individuals of all ages.
a lot of time with the neurodivergent population, there it's something that's overlooked. I think a lot of times, us as physical therapists, we have a tendency to shy away because of the fact that most of us did not receive formal training in school on behavioral interventions to address during a session. So it causes some hesitation with physical therapists really diving into the neurodivergent population. But the way that physical therapy can best support the population is looking at things such as how the child is moving. Can the child run in the same pattern as their peers? Are they able to push and pull themselves on the swing in order to provide that sensory outlook for play? You know, are they able to skip? Can they gallop? How is their balance? Are they running into objects? There's a lot of, you know, and this would go into the balance, the coordination, the motor planning. A lot of times it's the same skills that occupational therapy is addressing, except for they're looking more at, are they capable of using their utensils to feed themselves? Are they able to put on their clothes? It's just looking at the same skills, but with gross motor activity. And a lot of times those gross motor activities are extremely important for sensory regulation. Even us as adults, when we feel angry, when we're upset, we go on a walk, we go swimming, we go on a jog, we do something physical in order to re-regulate our emotions. So by developing these skills in a child who is neurodivergent, you're empowering them to be able to have a way to regulate.
I love what you just said so much. And I personally have that experience. Again, we've been talking about it, but like I just recently went through a move. Lots of things have been changing in my life. And so I like recently drove back to Austin yesterday, and I just felt so overwhelmed yesterday with all of these things going on. And I just knew that my body needed movement and I needed to go for a walk. And I was outside walking around for just like an hour and around the house that I was staying at. And so I love that you touched on it because it really resonates with me now. And so, but I have that tool to know, like, and to be able to both realize that I need to go out for a walk and regulate, but also I'm able to go walk around and identify that that helps me to feel better. So that's such an important piece that I think is often overlooked, that we need that first step, like those first skills for that movement, for that physical activity to really help our whole bodies feel better. So I love that you really highlighted that.
And I think a lot of times, because of the fact that there's a lot of other issues at play, a lot of times it's not thought about. It's kind of put on the back burner, or it's assumed that the child can, you know, push themselves on a swing by themselves, but somebody else is actually doing the movement for them, and no one's stopping to look and see if the child is truly capable of doing the activity, or if the child is dependent upon someone else doing that activity for them. So in a sense, by teaching them these skills, we are empowering the child to find new ways to self-regulate. One of my favorite examples is a neurodivergent child that I worked with many years ago, and he was nonverbal. He had a lot of behavioral issues, and he was never able to adapt to a communication device. So he was constantly frustrated because of the fact that he had no control. And one of the things that we worked on, because he had a lot of issues with motor planning, one of the things that we worked on together was being able to climb a jungle gym. And once he was able to master the skill, he was able to get to the top of the jungle gym. And whenever he was frustrated, this is exactly where he would go, because it was the one place where he was empowered, because he was on top and he could see everybody else, and he was finally in control. And that was where he would go to self-regulate. It was incredible to see him develop this skill through his motor abilities.
And touching on back to the swinging example as well, our entire goal for all of our helping professional fields, like we want the individual that we're helping to be as independent as possible, have as much autonomy as possible. And so, like you said, swinging is such a huge activity for children's, teens, and adults. I love to go swinging and just regulate that way. And so again, if we are helping them to swing, we are co-regulating, we're helping them regulate, but our end goal should always be how can we make sure that they can do this as independently as possible. So I really love that you also touched on you really need that physical therapist expertise to identify what are the different things that we need to be working on to make sure that they can be doing this activity completely independently. So I love that you touched on just that independence piece as well.
I think what's coming up for me over here, brilliant, Rebekah, you're amazing. I also, from the physical therapist perspective, the medical assessment piece, maybe there's a reason they can't climb because there's a restriction in the joint. Maybe they're having some pain. So the physical therapist looks at that medical piece that OT doesn't usually incorporate. And I think that's really important to let's make sure all the joints are functioning normally. Are the muscles long enough? Toe walking is a classic example. Um, and that muscle gets contracted. As well, you can work on getting those heels down on you want, but if you don't get the muscle length behind it, the structure behind it, you can't go anywhere with it. And that's the piece that PTs cover. The first two questions I always ask families are is your child safe? Do they fall? If they're having a lot of falls, there could very easily be a musculoskeletal issue behind that. And that is where we differ from OT or other professions in the neurodivergent world. So it's definitely more of a medical perspective there. I had another thought too. We were talking about giving the child a way to self-regulate, but with motor movement, we allow them, it's a way to connect with other kids and their families. Maybe then you can all go on walks together, or if we can get them on a bike, that kind of thing to be part of our world. The shift I've noticed lately is we're moving from something's not right with these kiddos, we have to fix them, to nothing's wrong with these kids. This is just how they're wired. How do we work with their systems to interact with our world that exists? We want to give them access to us as well as we're trying to gain access to them. And physical movement is a huge part of that.
I love that. And that
Yeah.
was great too. Again, you guys are just talking about so many great touch points of building that independence and then building that connection both with their peers and their family as well. And with summer coming up, all of the vacations were going on and like going to the pool. So yes, exactly. Just continued skills that can be addressed and supported by physical therapists. So
Right.
that's awesome. And so
Another thought I didn't just mention is pain. These
yes,
kids are having pain.
and
That's definitely an indication for physical therapy as well.
it's huge. And I think, again, speaking from my background in behavior, a lot of times you can view something as, oh, they're doing that because they want attention, or they're doing that because they just don't want to do this. And it's like, well, we need to really make sure we're looking at it in a holistic way to make sure, because they may be falling to the ground because their legs hurt so bad, so the
Yes.
physical therapist can assess, or they may, and again, it's just, again, maybe head hitting, things like that. It might be we need to speak to a neurologist because of their head, they're constantly having headaches. So again, viewing physical therapy as another tool in your toolbox, not something where it's like, oh, well, that doesn't relate to me, or that my child walks just fine. But it's like, well, maybe they do walk just fine. And maybe you see these coordination milestones that they're hitting, but maybe there's still other pieces, again, like maybe their strength. And again,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about in the past, like their core strength and really having a focus on that. So I think, again, just always counting physical therapy in when you're wanting to look at helping your one. So.
And just to segue, talking about other healthcare professionals, as a team for a neurodivergent child, I think it's so important for us to have that collaboration piece with the OTs a lot, because we do a lot of, okay, how much of this is sensory based or behavior based versus a physical issue?
Right.
And by working as a team with the other professionals, that's imperative to figure out, because every child is unique. They're their own little puzzle that we get to
Yes,
figure out. And by
absolutely.
working as a cohesive team with the neurologists and the ABA people and all of us together, that's how we can best serve these kids.
I love that. And we've talked a lot about the differences kind of between PT and OT. I have a few questions with that, but I'm trying to think of where to start first. What are some things that you would recommend, or some situations where you would recommend a parent to then seek out physical therapy? Not necessarily versus OT. I'll kind of move to that in a second, but if parents are kind of noticing, again, maybe their toddler or their teen or even adult too, just kind of exhibiting certain things or having a challenging time with certain things, when would you say is a time where seeking an OT or a PT professional opinion would be beneficial?
I think that if there is a doubt that the child is performing age appropriate, or the adult age appropriate physical skills, it's worth investigating either through doing a screening or through doing a formal evaluation. A lot of times this goes back to an area that's dismissed. There's an assumption that maybe because of the child's behaviors, they don't want to participate in these activities. So if a child is per se 3 and they're not jumping yet, they're not going up and down the stairs independently one step at a time, if these things are being observed by the parent, I think it's good practice to assume that there might be a reason why, and not particularly think that the child just doesn't want to do it, that there might be something that's impeding their ability to do it. And a lot of times, to gauge it, the best way is to look at on-level peers. If the on-level peer is jumping and doing a hopscotch and riding a bike and galloping and climbing up playscapes, then it should be assumed that if the neurodivergent child is not doing those things, that it's possible that they are behind. Another good indicator of weak core strength would be if a child is completely slumped over. A lot of times that means that they're collapsing into their abdominal cavity. They don't have the core strength to maintain that upright posture. And when that occurs, it's going to limit what the child can do. And when we think about, especially with increasing concerns about the level of physical activity that people are getting, when there's these impairments present, we're impeding the progression of having those physical outlets.
Yeah, no, I loved all of those points. And again, specifically, how they're walking up the stairs, how they're walking, how they're running, and really looking into those just areas where, again, maybe they're not physically progressing and making those milestones where their peers are at, identifying.
And I think the big question is why.
Yes.
That is really genuinely the big question is why. Why is my child not stepping up the stairs one step at a time? Why does my child always need a hand? Why does my child not jump off of the curb? Why is this occurring? And when you start to investigate the why, you can then determine, is this an actual impairment or is it a behavioral issue? If it is an impairment, is this impeding my child from living a full, healthy, happy life to their ability?
I love you're making me so happy with the things that you're touching on, especially the why. As a behavior analyst, that's the biggest thing that I'm always asking throughout when I'm hearing maybe a parent telling me about things that they're observing, or like if a teacher tells me they're observing something, or another behavior therapist. So that's always the first question that I think should be asked for really anyone and anything in your life is, why is this happening? But especially when we're trying to support our loved ones, neurotypical or neurodivergent, on maybe it's really seeming like they are falling at the end of the day because they don't want to do this activity, but maybe they're falling at the end of the day because they have, and again, I shouldn't be speaking on this because it's not my profession, but speaking with you guys, maybe just something in their body is so overworked that their body is just completely exhausted at that point. Maybe it's not, they're just trying to like escape a task, or maybe they're not trying to, again, a lot of times people just assume it's for attention, but again, asking why, and if something doesn't seem 100% clear, pursuing other avenues and trying to see like, okay, well, maybe could it be this one? Like it might be this, but I'm not 100% convinced. So maybe let's look into this avenue. And again, as Jenny, you were touching on with kind of more of a medical perspective on things too. That's such a serious area, which I know I already mentioned, but I think sometimes that can be the last thing that we're thinking about. Like we kind of try all
Right.
these things first, but it's like, well, let's give it a medical, like they could be deficient in a vitamin, and that's why these things are happening. Or again, they're experiencing severe pain or like extreme fatigue that's happening sooner than it should. So again, I love the why, and I think that's so crucial for parents, professionals, educators, everyone to know and to just be cognizant of, to have that.
I have a kiddo I'm working with right now came in because he would not do anything without grabbing anyone's hand. He needed constantly handhold assist for everything. And when I got in there and I really assessed him, it actually was not a PT problem. His strength was fantastic. He had good motor planning skills. He had great safety awareness. All of the joints, the muscles, everything was good. It was communication. He wanted to go do these things, but he had no way to communicate it. So he would just grab people and do it that way. Like, so that in that case, that wasn't a PT problem, but it was very worthwhile for the parent to bring him into me because I was able to point them back to the communication piece. So now he carries this is so perfect. He carries his communication pad with him, his device, and number one, he has to hold it. So he can't grab parent or people all the time.
Yeah.
Because he's holding his pad. Number two, it gives him the power to say, I want to do this. I want to do this. This kid has exploded. He's now running, jumping, climbing. It's insane. So
Wow.
I know, isn't that a great story? It speaks to the power of teamwork, collaboration. And I also want to say, if you're having I wonder about PT, get a referral. It's not going to hurt anything. Err on the side of caution. Get in there, talk to us, and a good physical therapist who understands pediatrics and this population is going to help you hone in on what you're seeing. I have never seen a child where I didn't see what the parent was seeing. Like, he runs funny. Like, sure enough, he does run funny. What is that? So
Yeah.
trust your instincts as a parent. You know what your child needs. Advocate for your kiddo, and advocate for the team. We do work best as a team, and let us all lay eyes on him to get the best outcomes we possibly can.
I love that. I was just telling a parent today. Um, Again, I think a lot of times parents feel, or maybe were made to feel, that when they were speaking to ABA or speech or PT or OT, that those professionals, they were the experts. And yes, while they're the experts in the field, the parent is the expert in their child, in their family dynamics. And so sometimes parents, I've found, don't always initially advocate for, maybe if they don't agree with something, because it's like, well, you're the professional. It's like, well, no, if what I'm recommending doesn't go with where you think the um just the priorities are at, then we need to work towards other things first, because again, you are with your child, teen, or adult the majority of the time. You have known them their entire life. So I love that you also spoke on just advocating and just always trying to seek out these other professionals' opinions while keeping in mind your child. And so again, just advocate. So
And you are choosing your healthcare professionals. You're in charge.
yes,
If you run into a physical therapist or any professional who tells you how you should be doing things and makes you feel that you're not adequate as a parent or you're not powerful, that's probably not the best therapist fit for you. And you have the right to say, you know what, this doesn't work. And search out someone else who fits. You should have a team that you can talk to, that you trust, that supports you in what you're going through as well.
absolutely. Yeah. So what would be some of, but like both of you, your recommendations for a parent seeking physical therapy, just maybe some good questions to ask a physical therapist, especially like a parent of a neurodivergent child, teen, adult, just things to kind of look for in a PT, just to kind of make sure that they will be the right fit, they have adequate training, those types of things.
I think one of the best traits that you can find in any therapist is someone who is curious. That seems to be a good match, because especially within the physical therapist community, you may not be able to find a PT that specializes in neurodivergent conditions. That is going to be a very hard uh, individual to find. However, if you have a curious therapist who is compassionate, has good communication skills, is willing to learn, especially on the sensory and behavioral component, a lot of times that's how you're going to find the right fit. Often you'll have a treating therapist and you'll have an evaluating therapist. You'll have the PT and the PTA. Sometimes you have just a PT. It depends on the situation. So learning who you're going to be working with, their background, if they're open to collaborating with other disciplines. Also, where is the child being seen? If the child's being seen, especially in a clinic, like in a ABA center, a lot of times the therapist can then rely on collaborating with the BCBA, the RBTs, to learn more of what works with this individual, to motivate them to try new things or things that might be difficult. And by finding those characteristics, a lot of times you're going to find a good match. It doesn't per se depend on the level of experience the PT has in the neurodivergent population. It's more of who they are and how committed they are to the progression of that child. I know when I first started working with the neurodivergent population, I relied heavily upon my BCBAs and my RBTs until I was able to find a course specifically for a physical therapist working with this particular population for sensory regulation and behavioral intervention. Because once again, that wasn't something I was formally trained when I went to school.
That's yeah, and I love your very first point, just being curious. It ties back to when we were talking about asking why, and then again, the openness to collaboration piece I think is also so essential. While you're saying those terms, I kind of was going to ask, would you all be able to break down kind of just within the physical therapy world the roles of a PT, a PTA, and then I love that you also clarified you have an evaluator and then someone who's actually like implementing the treatment. So can you guys kind of break down the tiers within the PT world for someone who maybe isn't familiar at all or sort of familiar?
Well, right now in the fall, you have both a physical therapist assistant and a PT.
Right.
So often the PT is always going to do the evaluation. So when you're dealing with anything with the medical equipment, the initial evaluation, the medical component, all of this is going to come directly from the physical therapist. Physical therapists, they see children as well. However, they also have the ability to pass on to a PT assistant. With the PT assistant, treating is our bread and butter. That is what we do. It is our primary function. So within the two, you can have that physical therapist assistant, or you can just have the PT. It just depends on the staffing of the particular company that you're working with, the availability of the clinicians. And Jenny, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you nailed those last two questions 100%. I have nothing further to say, except the relationship between the PT and the PT assistant is important.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, I think it's more of an energy or vibe you'll pick up on of how is their relationship. If you don't want one who doesn't trust the other, or vice versa, or if you're getting a funny feeling that they're not communicating with each other, then that's something that needs to be addressed. So again, go back to your gut. But in my experience, the PT PTA collaboration is imperative, and having the trust in each other, communication with each other. Do they talk to each other? That's important. And parents, I think, could say, how often do you check in with each other, and how are you communicating to make sure that we're all on the same page? That's really important too in that PTA world.
I love that. And again, with the collaboration piece, parents are so valid, and being able to ask, how often are you guys collaborating? How often do you all talk to each other? Those are not just, I don't know, just those are effective ways for you to also communicate your priorities as a parent, that you want your professionals all collaborating with each other. And so, again, as you guys just beautifully broke down the difference between PT and PTA, they need to be collaborating. And then how do you guys usually collaborate with like occupational therapists? And because I think sometimes people think it's either or, like it's either occupational or physical, but again, or sometimes just see like PTOT. So it's like, is it combined? So I'd love if you guys could kind of also dive into how you guys collaborate, because you guys do have your own just areas of expertise and strengths of what you're working on. So how does that kind of typically look?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that my child can have either or, PT or OT. That is a myth I've been hearing more, especially in my new role, which is usually not true unless there is some insurance stipulation. A child is allowed to have all three disciplines. So the rest of it might be an insurance component, but the parent doesn't have to choose per se unless their particular insurance is saying that. The other interesting myth that I've been running into recently is that the child doesn't qualify for services because they don't have a comorbidity with the diagnosis of autism. So they think that because they only have the autism diagnosis, they don't qualify. That only qualifies for OT and speech, which also is not true. And as far as collaboration with other disciplines, especially like with OT, with speech, with all of that, this is where it gets a little bit more tricky and creative. A lot of times because of the fact that the services are piecemeal together, especially within the home health community. You might be receiving PT services from one organization, you're receiving OT services and speech from a different organization, and then you also have an ABA clinic or an ABA provider that is working at home. Then you also might have school therapists. There starts to be a lot of hands in the pot. One of the best ways that a parent can support their child in ensuring that the collaboration is occurring is starting a either email thread or a text message thread to ensure that everybody even has access to the contact information of the treating clinicians. If the individuals are all working for the same organization, it's a little bit easier, but we don't always have ideal circumstances. So it helps and it empowers everybody if the parent can help make that connection to ensure everybody knows who everybody is and they can have a more cohesive team come to the field for their child.
Exactly.
And there are the legalities to consider too from different organizations. Parents will need to sign releases with the company saying it is okay for all of us to talk to each other across the different organizations.
Right.
So that's the one thing they'll have to consider as well. But I do agree with Rebekah. The text thread is kind of the best way to quickly get a hold of each other, make sure everyone's on the same page. That's an ideal way. And it is okay for the parent to request that and initiate that.
Right.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And I've said it on a few of these videos, and I think we've mentioned it before, but my favorite way to just express the importance of collaboration is, it's my language spiel that I go on, but just like when your child's seeing an ABA therapist, like picturing it as the ABA therapist is speaking German, and then the physical therapist is speaking French, and then their speech therapist is speaking Spanish. And so everyone is speaking in their different language, meaning they're all working on these different skills, working on these different targets, but they may be phrasing, like truly phrasing it differently to their child, or just again working on it in a different way. And so if everyone is able to collaborate and talk through a text group chain, or have a common like email thread that everyone is talking off of and seeing, oh, okay, this is a skill that Jenny is just now introducing. I'm thinking of introducing a skill that really complements that. So how about I talk to Jenny and we kind of make sure the things that we're directly targeting and the wording and everything is pretty similar so that again we're all working on these same things, so then the child, teen, or adult is able to generalize those skills faster. And so we're all doing great work. We're all working to improve just the quality of life and their communication, their regulation, all of these things. But if we all are working together and letting each other know also, hey, they are really open to trying new things when you're playing Taylor Swift. And so maybe if you think like when you're working on this, it could be really helpful. Or hey, just a heads up, like it's Monday and I just want to let you all know that they went to the water park. Billy gets so excited when he starts talking about it. So maybe you could like incorporate that. And so again, trying to just everyone helping each other because parents have so much on their plate. They may not remember on your Friday session that they did go to a water park and how much Billy likes to talk about it, but maybe he's still so excited to tell you. And so thank goodness, like Rebekah sent me an email about that. And I know now that like they went, so then we can really incorporate that. And maybe we can do these water slide crafts while we're working on like all of these different things. So it's really just only positive things come from collaboration. And so to just emphasize that for parents to know, just that's just another way that we can completely support their loved ones.
And I know with the home health world, a lot of times we have consent forms built into the evaluation packet that allows the communication to occur. With that being said, this is where video clips are an amazing thing because a lot of times, even if you're talking about the water park, for instance, if the parent sends off a video clip, look, we went to the water park, and it shows the child engaging in this environment, you're looking at all of the different disciplines at one time, and you're seeing the activity come together. And then each individual person is able to pull their part. Or if the parent's trying to get the child to do an activity at home and they're saying, hey, we're really having a hard time with dressing. This is happening, and there's a video clip that demonstrates where the difficulty is. Is it a single, is a child having a hard time standing on one leg? Is that one component of why the child is having difficulty with dressing? Is it truly the child's not capable of coordinating the clothing? The videos often, like being able to see the activity, allows everybody to bring their piece to the table together. And then also it allows all of the therapists to see the feedback from the other clinicians as far as what they're doing to encourage, the processing of the activity, or, how we can all come together to create a solution for that particular problem where the parent is stuck.
The video idea is such a good idea. Yeah, so like actually sending, and like pictures are fun to see, obviously too, but again, videos can help every single discipline, like you said, how they're communicating, how they're regulating in that moment, how they're advocating for what they need, how they're moving, and just their fine motor, all of those things. So then, yeah, we can all just see all together. And then maybe I notice a quick little thing like behavior wise or like partially communication, or a speech therapist knows a speech thing. And so then we can just all kind of start to work together and say, hey, did you notice this part? And maybe can you think of a way you could work this into your sessions? Then like we're working on all the things. So that's a great idea. And again, emphasizing.
And success is a child to be able to fully engage in their environment. I have a family I'm still working with that the parents send me videos of their weekend outings and the new skills that this particular child is encouraged to explore. And we have been adapting our sessions based off of his interests because of these are the things that he wants to do when he's out playing with his friends.
Yes.
So it allows me to create a even more fine-tuned treatment strategy to meet his specific needs because I know what he likes to do when he is truly playing, not per se when I see him and he's doing my structured activities.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking too about don't forget about the school-based team. It almost feels like there's the outpatient home health team and the schools. And sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, the school's separate, they do what they do. But boy, in the perfect world of collaboration, so great to pull the school people in as well.
Absolutely.
So this child is getting all the same information. We're all aware of what each other is doing for the seamless treatment and the best outcomes.
Yes, definitely. And I think, and I love that you touched on it because I have personally heard of like teachers kind of feeling left in the back and
Yeah.
like if we should be really focusing and making sure that anyone is supported, it's especially teachers because
Yes.
again, they're most likely seeing the kids more consistently, more just longer durations too throughout the day. And so if they don't have the tools to say, oh, I've like just the physical therapist said that climbing like really helps them and we have this structure in the back so we should just do that maybe proactively before I don't know something else challenging happens or whatever but just making sure that again their entire team every single person that just whether they engage with your loved one once a month or for 40 hours a week we need to make sure that everyone is on that same page so I love that you also really brought attention and emphasized the importance for including school teams as well, because that's so essential.
And we're definitely not there. There's a big gap. And
There,
I think that it's time to start closing that. So
absolutely.
we can all be the ones to be communicating and start building that bridge for these kiddos.
Right.
Very valid point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, are there any other points that you all kind of wanted to touch on just within the physical therapy field or collaboration piece or any other things that you wanted to make sure that you had a chance to share today?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, I feel like we covered the gamut. That was very efficient.
Yeah, I
Covered a
think
lot.
It's great.
I'm hopeful for it to just kind of, and then also really anyone, even other physical therapists who maybe have never worked with neurodivergent individuals. So it's seeing like, okay, these are the things that are worked on. Well, I do this all the time. And so again, also knowing who they can reach out to. So speaking of that, could you all like either share just to share a way for people to maybe access you and maybe reach out if they have questions. So if you have like a website or a company or a LinkedIn or an email where they can reach out if they just have any questions or just want to see how maybe their child could benefit from physical therapy.
Go
I
ahead.
work for Strive Health Services. My email address is D as in Delta, I as in Indigo, L as in Lima, K as in Kangaroo, S as in Sam, R Dilks at strivehs.com. Feel free to email me. You can look at our website, but that's the best way to get in contact with me. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it for me.
Cool.
I'm actually an independent contractor, so I work primarily, my company is called Kids on the Move. And you can find my website on www.thegymlady.com. It'll have a form on there where you can contact me. It'll shoot me an email or we can connect that way. I also work for outpatient. I see kids through kid therapy, and I have a couple home health patients through Care Options for Kids. So they can reach me through those two agencies as well. And my name on this is iPhone Jenny, but my real name is Jenny Johnson. A little typo there. It's fine.
I think that's just fun. I think you should always go by iPhone Jenny. Just,
It works. So Jenny Johnson is my full name, and there's a few options, and I am actually moving away from the clinical hands-on treatment. I'm heading toward retirement age, and I'm doing more consulting, mentoring. So I'm happy to support families, support their therapists if they have the PT they found they like, but the PT wants some mentoring. That's where I'm headed with most of my services moving forward at this point.
awesome. Well,
Mhm.
very cool. Well, thank you both for just sharing your experience and expertise today. I hope it just serves as a helpful resource for families. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah,
Okay.
see you soon.
Thanks so much,
Cool.
Amber. This was
Thank
such a
you.
great conversation. I think so important for this community. And
Yeah,
I'm so glad to be part of it.
awesome. Thank you.